What if I told you that the one person a narcissist cannot conquer is the one who sees through their mask and chooses silence over drama, clarity over confusion, and power over pity? Today, I'll reveal how a super empath doesn't just survive a narcissist, but dismantles their illusion piece by piece. There exists a type of individual so profoundly attuned to the emotional current of others that they can feel a lie before it is spoken. This person, often overlooked, is the super empath, a soul whose depth of feeling is matched only by their depth of perception. But make no mistake, the empath is not a fragile creature easily broken by the harsh winds of human cruelty. No, they are forged in fire, the fire of manipulation, betrayal, and psychological warfare. While the world has been conditioned to see sensitivity as weakness, the super empath holds within them a power so potent that, when activated, it becomes a silent force that rewrites the rules of engagement in any relationship, especially one with a narcissist. A narcissist may size up the empath as an easy target, someone pliable, someone kind, someone eager to give. And indeed, the empath gives freely at first. They extend love, understanding, compassion, all the tools of a heart that seeks harmony. But herein lies the unseen power. What the narcissist fails to realize is that the super empath is not giving from a place of desperation. They are giving from a reservoir that has no bottom. That generosity is not weakness. It is the overflow of an internal strength that the narcissist cannot comprehend, let alone possess. The narcissist sees kindness as an opening, but the super empath is simply exercising their gift until the moment they realize it is being exploited. And that moment is when everything changes. Consider this example. A super empath is in a relationship with a narcissist who uses charm as a mask, manipulation as a strategy, and control as their drug. At first, the empath tries to soothe the conflict, to understand the erratic behavior, to bring peace to chaos. They internalize the blame, thinking perhaps they have failed in some unseen way. But the super empath doesn't stay in confusion forever. No, they begin to see, really see. They notice how the narcissist deflects accountability, how every compliment is followed by a covert jab, how moments of affection are strategically used to keep them bound in emotional debt. The empath's mind begins to awaken. Patterns become visible, and once truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. This is where the true power of the super empath begins to rise, not in rage, but in revelation. Unlike others who might fight fire with fire, the super empath doesn't seek to destroy the narcissist. They don't need to. Their strength is internal, it is spiritual, it is unshakable. They do not react, they reflect. They do not beg, they observe. And their silence, when they finally go quiet, becomes deafening. That silence does not signal surrender, it signals ascension. It signals the moment the empath has reclaimed their throne and is no longer available for the narcissist's theater of control. It is in this shift, from confusion to clarity, from emotion to awareness, that the empath becomes untouchable. And this untouchability, this calm dominion over self, is the greatest torment a narcissist can endure. The narcissist may rage, manipulate, smear, or beg, but none of it lands because the super empath has exited the game without ever announcing their departure. They simply stop dancing. The power of the super empath is invisible to the eye, but undeniable to the soul. It is not about dominance over others, it is about dominion over self. And when a person masters their internal world, no one in the external world can trap them ever again. The narcissist feels this shift not in the empath's words, but in their energy, their detachment, their peace. For the narcissist who thrives on emotional chaos, that peace is not just unfamiliar, it is unbearable. In the game of psychological warfare, the most dangerous player is not the one who speaks first, nor the one who strikes the loudest. It is the one who watches, who waits, who listens intently without exposing their hand. The super empath, though deeply emotional by nature, evolves into this player over time, an astute observer of human behavior. Their eyes are not just instruments of sight, they are instruments of insight. And this ability to read between the lines of tone, gesture, and intention is what turns the tides against the narcissist. While the narcissist is preoccupied with putting on a show, with managing their image and playing puppeteer to others' emotions, the super empath is in the background, collecting data, mental notes that will one day dismantle the entire performance. You see, narcissists thrive in chaos. They speak in riddles, manipulate context, and distort reality until their victims are tangled in webs of doubt. But the super empath does not remain blind. Over time, they begin to observe with precision. They notice the shift in the narcissist's voice when a lie is told, the timing of affection just before an ask, the calculated withdrawal of praise when control is slipping. They begin to see the narcissist's behavior not as random cruelty, but as a pattern, a formula. And once a pattern is recognized, it can be predicted. Once it can be predicted, it can be controlled, not through confrontation, but through strategic detachment. Take, for example, a workplace setting where a narcissistic manager plays favorites, manipulates narratives, and gaslights employees to maintain superiority. A super empath new to the environment may first try to please, to adapt, to overachieve. But slowly, they begin to notice peculiar consistencies. Praise is always given when others are present, but criticism is reserved for private moments. Tasks are delegated with hidden landmines, and successes are subtly stolen. The empath sees through the charm, and instead of retaliating emotionally, they watch. They log every manipulation, every contradiction, every passive-aggressive remark. And then they begin to adjust their behavior, not to please, but to protect. They become neutral, non-reactive. They respond with measured politeness, never revealing what they know. The narcissist, sensing a change, becomes agitated. They feed off reaction, and the empath has stopped giving it. They push harder, more desperately, but the empath remains grounded. And now the power dynamic has shifted, not because the empath has confronted the narcissist, but because they have understood them. And that understanding becomes an invisible noose, tightening with every desperate attempt the narcissist makes to regain control. The more the empath watches, the more they dominate, not through force, but through foresight. This kind of domination is not loud or boastful. It is quiet, surgical, strategic. The empath, through observation, has dismantled the narcissist's illusion of power. They are no longer emotionally invested in the bait. They do not fall for triangulation, for guilt tripping, for manufactured crises. Every move the narcissist makes becomes transparent. Their manipulation, once terrifying, now appears almost juvenile. And this clarity, this emotional X-ray vision, renders the narcissist powerless in the empath's presence. Observation, when practiced with discipline, becomes the highest form of psychological mastery. It transforms the super empath from prey into predator, not in the traditional sense, but in the sense of control over the battlefield of the mind. The empath does not need to retaliate, they simply anticipate. They do not scream to be heard, they speak only when the silence has said enough. And in that silence, the narcissist is left to wrestle with the one thing they cannot manipulate, the truth reflected back to them by someone who sees everything. There is a principle as old as time, yet as quietly devastating as a shadow in the night. When someone sees their true self reflected back at them, not through admiration, but through unmistakable clarity, they often recoil. This is the foundation of what we call the reverse mirror effect. The narcissist, whose entire identity is built on illusion, projection, and control, cannot bear to confront their own reflection, especially when that reflection is unmasked, unfiltered, and stripped of grandeur. The super empath, once emotionally entangled in the narcissist's web, becomes that mirror, but not the mirror that flatters or distorts, instead, the mirror that reveals. And this revelation is not verbal, it is energetic, it is behavioral. It is the empath turning the narcissist's own tactics back on them, not with malice, but with mastery. In the early stages of a toxic dynamic, the narcissist uses what appears to be mirroring themselves. They copy the empath's values, likes, dreams, and language to build false intimacy. It feels magnetic, almost fated, but the purpose is not connection, it is infiltration. Once the narcissist feels securely attached, the game shifts to control. Gaslighting begins, manipulation seeps in, boundaries are tested, then trampled. And yet, within this chaos, the super empath begins to awaken. Their high sensitivity, once a tool for harmony, becomes a tool for survival. They begin to see what's being done to them and why. And it is here that the true mirror is raised, not to reflect the narcissist's charm, but to reflect their core. Imagine a romantic relationship where the narcissist begins withdrawing affection as a form of punishment. They sulk, they give the silent treatment, they make passive-aggressive comments cloaked as jokes. In the past, the empath would chase, apologize, over-explain, trying to restore the peace. But now, with awareness, the empath simply mirrors the behavior. They become quiet, detached, unbothered. But unlike the narcissist, their silence is not manipulative, it is deliberate. When the narcissist makes a biting comment, the empath responds not with emotion, but with neutrality. When affection is withheld, the empath does not plead, they simply redirect their energy inward. And in this calm reflection, the narcissist begins to feel the sting of their own tactics. The power of this effect lies not in vengeance, but in reflection. The empath doesn't stoop to cruelty or abandon their integrity. Instead, they become the mirror that shows the narcissist what they truly are, without words, without war. The narcissist expects chaos, drama, pleading, but receives peace, boundaries, and stillness. They expect a reaction and are met with indifference. They expect to be feared and are met with quiet understanding. And nothing terrifies a narcissist more than being seen clearly, because their entire strategy hinges on confusion and deception. In this reverse mirroring, the super empath doesn't become a narcissist. They become the antidote. By calmly reflecting the behavior back, the empath exposes it. The narcissist, who once manipulated from behind the curtain, is now standing in front of a mirror that shows every string, every mask, every flaw. And unlike others who would respond with rage or tears, the empath responds with silence and detachment, an energetic mirror that reflects not just the narcissist's behavior, but their very emptiness. There exists within every narcissist a relentless hunger, not for love, not for truth, but for validation. This is their lifeblood, their sustenance, their drug of choice. Psychologists have a term for it, narcissistic supply. It comes in many forms: admiration, attention, praise, even fear and conflict. The narcissist doesn't discriminate. Any form of emotional energy, whether positive or negative, is acceptable so long as it centers them as the focus of your mind. The tragedy, however, is that this supply must be renewed constantly. It is a never-ending appetite, a black hole that swallows affection, only to demand more. The super empath, once caught in this cycle, pours out energy, empathy, and effort in vain, unaware that they are feeding a creature whose thirst cannot be quenched. But when the empath awakens and begins to withhold this supply, a radical shift takes place. It is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of liberation, and for the narcissist, it is the beginning of starvation. At first, the super empath gives everything. They respond to every crisis the narcissist invents. They reassure them when they sulk, defend themselves when they're accused, and chase after affection that's dangled like a reward. Every tear, every question, every attempt to seek clarity only strengthens the narcissist's grip. But over time, the empath begins to notice a disturbing pattern. Their love is being weaponized. Their kindness is used against them. They are not building connection. They are fueling control. And when this realization takes root, the empath begins to shift, not externally at first, but internally. The desperation to be understood is replaced by the desire to be free. The need to please fades. The empath, no longer seeking the narcissist's approval, reclaims their energy. They stop feeding the beast. Imagine a scenario in which the narcissist initiates one of their classic manipulations, a fabricated crisis. Perhaps they provoke an argument out of nowhere, accuse the empath of something baseless, then withdraw in theatrical silence. In the past, the empath would plead for peace, try to resolve the tension, over-communicate to clear the air. But now, awakened and aware, the empath does none of it. They do not text, they do not call, they do not chase. They allow the silence to stretch. And in that space, something extraordinary begins to happen. The narcissist, once the puppet master, starts unraveling. Without reaction, there is no fuel. Without supply, there is no control. The very foundation of their power begins to crack. What makes this form of resistance so powerful is its invisibility. The empath does not engage in arguments. They do not issue threats or ultimatums. They simply withdraw their energy. Every time the narcissist attempts to provoke a response and receives only stillness, only calm, they are forced to face their own emptiness. And that, more than any insult or retaliation, is what tortures them, because it reveals the horrifying truth they spend their lives hiding from, that they are not in control, not of the empath, not of the relationship, not even of themselves. The withholding of narcissistic supply is not just a refusal to participate, it is a declaration of sovereignty. The empath does not need to expose the narcissist to others. They expose them to themselves, and they do it by refusing to feed what was never real to begin with. In that refusal, the narcissist begins to unravel, because the one thing they cannot survive without, the emotional energy of others, has been cut off at the source. There is a state of mind that once attained makes a person untouchable, not because they are hardened or unfeeling, but because they have risen above emotional enslavement. This is empowered detachment, a conscious decision to remove one's emotional investment from a source of manipulation. For the super empath, whose entire nature is wired to connect, to feel deeply, and to respond with compassion, detachment does not come naturally. It is not a default. It is a discipline. But once cultivated, it becomes a fortress, a force field, a psychological shield that no narcissist can penetrate. It is this calm, this steady refusal to be baited into chaos that drives the narcissist to madness. They cannot provoke it, cannot shake it, cannot understand it. To them, it is not just indifference, it is betrayal. The empath who has stepped into empowerment no longer reacts to every storm the narcissist creates. They do not answer the dramatic phone call at midnight. They do not respond to backhanded compliments or calculated guilt trips. They see through the performance and remain unmoved. And it is in this stillness, this icy calm, that the true power is revealed. The narcissist, accustomed to controlling the emotional climate, is now dealing with someone who has mastered the temperature within themselves. They cannot raise it, they cannot freeze it. The empath has reclaimed the thermostat of their own inner world. Picture a scenario where the narcissist accuses the empath of being distant, cold, or ungrateful, a projection meant to stir emotion. The old empath, desperate for harmony, would defend themselves, explain, reassure, or even apologize for something they didn't do. But the empowered empath hears the accusation and simply responds with calm acknowledgement or complete silence. They do not flinch. They do not justify. They let the storm pass through them like wind through an open window. Their eyes no longer dart with confusion or panic. They hold steady, still resolute. And this unnerves the narcissist more than any rage could, because it is evidence of control, not over the narcissist, but over self. This icy calm is not born of bitterness, it is born of wisdom. It says, I see you, I understand your pattern, and I no longer choose to play. It is the refusal to be disturbed by the noise of someone else's chaos. And the more the narcissist tries to escalate through insults, through silence, through threats, the more impotent they become. For their greatest weapon has always been emotional chaos, and now they are dealing with someone who cannot be dragged into disorder. The super empath learns that calm is not weakness, it is strategy, it is armor. It is the declaration that peace is no longer negotiable. They do not need to slam doors or raise voices. They simply exist in a state of inner control so firm that no manipulator can find a crack to crawl through. And while the narcissist may still perform their old routines, provoking, pleading, punishing, their power begins to dissolve in the presence of someone who no longer needs to respond. There is a sacred fire that burns in the heart of every super empath, ignited not by comfort or praise, but by pain. It is trauma in its raw and punishing form that often becomes the crucible for the most profound transformation. The super empath by nature is not just someone who feels deeply. They are someone who is forged in the depths of emotional suffering. They have walked through the darkness of manipulation, betrayal, abandonment, and gaslighting. They have questioned their worth, doubted their instincts, and pleaded for understanding in a world that seemed deaf to their truth. But what separates the super empath from others is not the trauma itself. It is what they do with that trauma. They transform through it. They rise not in spite of their wounds, but because of them. Trauma, especially in the hands of a narcissist, is not always loud. It is often subtle, insidious, and psychological. The narcissist doesn't just hurt the empath, they erode their sense of reality. They distort perception, rewrite history, and make the empath believe that they are the problem. This mental warfare is not just painful, it is identity shattering, but it is also the beginning of awakening. The empath begins to question not just the narcissist's behavior, but their own pattern of tolerating it. They begin to explore the roots of their need to please, their fear of abandonment, their belief that love must be earned through suffering. In this excavation, they begin to see themselves clearly for the first time, not as weak, but as wounded, not as broken, but as becoming. Consider an empath who has survived a toxic relationship that lasted years, one where every day was a careful dance around the narcissist's moods, expectations, and punishments. When the relationship finally ends, the empath is left shattered. But in that shattered space, something extraordinary begins. They start reading, learning, listening to others who've walked the same path. They find language for what they endured, words like gaslighting, trauma bond, emotional abuse. And with each word comes clarity, and with clarity comes strength. They begin to rebuild not just their life, but their identity. They enforce boundaries. They speak truth. They stop apologizing for existing. And soon they realize something miraculous. The very pain that nearly destroyed them has become the fuel for their rise. This is the hidden power of trauma. It does not just teach the empath what to avoid, it teaches them who they are. It awakens their discernment, sharpens their intuition, and turns their empathy into wisdom. They no longer rush to save others at the expense of themselves. They no longer confuse attachment with love or chaos with passion. They become anchored, not in fear, but in truth. And that anchoring creates a calm, powerful presence that the narcissist can no longer penetrate. The empath is no longer available for manipulation because they have outgrown the level of consciousness where it could reach them. Trauma becomes transformation the moment the empath stops asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and starts declaring, "What did this awaken in me?" That shift from victim to visionary is not a moment of arrogance. It is a moment of rebirth. The empath does not forget the pain, but they repurpose it. They use it to help others, to protect themselves, to create lives rooted in self-respect, not self-sacrifice. The very experiences that once silenced them now give them their voice. The tears they cried become the ink with which they rewrite their destiny. And the person who once walked on eggshells now walks in purpose, in clarity, and in unshakable inner power. And so let it be understood by every soul within the sound of my voice. The super empath does not defeat the narcissist through rage, retaliation, or revenge. No, they dismantle the narcissist by rising above them, by mastering their emotions, reclaiming their identity, and refusing to be manipulated one moment longer. The torment of the narcissist is not in being screamed at or exposed. It is in being seen, truly seen, by someone who is no longer under their spell. The greatest torture for a narcissist is not being hated. It is being irrelevant. It is being met with silence where once they sparked chaos. It is watching their favorite supply walk away, not with bitterness, but with power. The super empath, forged in fire and awakened through pain, becomes a force that cannot be controlled. Their calm becomes deafening. Their boundaries become impenetrable. And their absence becomes the one presence the narcissist cannot escape. The very traits once used against them, empathy, intuition, compassion, become their greatest weapons, refined into clarity, strength, and dominion over their own life. The narcissist may try to return, to resurrect the old dance, but the music has stopped. The stage is empty. The super empath has exited, not as a victim, but as a victor, not as someone broken, but as someone reborn.